So hello, here is David Agorello, aka DJ, working for the Hey URL Code Challenge for Full Stack Labs. Basically, this application is a shortener for URLs. What I am doing right here is going to explain a little bit architecture I made for this particular exercise because I did want to go a little bit forward on how to build this application. So for this particular case, database is going to be really simple. We're going to have an URL, we're going to have click. URL is going to store the short URLs that we are creating from an original URL. Later, going to explain which algorithm I'm using for that URL. In the click, we're going to store each visit that an user do on a URL, and also we're going to store browser information and platform information. For this particular case, I built an API that's going to access all the databases and manage all the controller actions for the models and also to control all the CRUD that we're going to perform on the URL. This API is going to be consumed by React.js and a few components on React. I decided to build for this particular project, and we're going to have just a client just acting for React. This particular thing was built because I wanted to have a single page application and didn't want to do too many reloads on the page. So let's begin. I'm going to show you all the things I did on this particular application. So first of all, we're going to split how the architecture is going to be done. So we're going to start doing some specs for the models. So we're going to be really basic on the URL spec and the click spec. For this particular case, we're going to gem file and we're going to use some gems, useful gems for this particular project. One of those is factory bot Rails. It's going to allow us to create factories to perform tests. Here I define a click factory and also I define here an URL factory. So basically I'm just creating a URL and just the data to fulfill this model. Okay, so for this URL spec, I'm going to start writing validations. So I start writing validations for this one. First of all, the original URLs needs to be in a valid format. Also, I need to check out where it needs to be invalid URL. It needs to validate that actually it's not a valid URL. For sure URL, I am going to use one algorithm, then just going to explain after this. But first of all, I need to have the specs. So I got a URL, whatever URL I have. That one I'm just going to submit save. After I submit save, I took the my idea is to generate the short URL after saving the model into the database. For this particular thing, I have this your other URL. It's going to just change the URL to something that is already there, just to validate uniqueness for that case. So after that, I need to check out that I actually generate a URL. So I need to check out that short URL is not nil. For particular case, I'm storing short URL just the piece of data that I'm like changing into the original. I'm not storing the full URL, the whole local domain and stuff like that. I'm just storing the path here, the relative path. After this, I got a check for a valid short URL. Doesn't have to have a lot of different special characters. Like, for example, this is not allowed in any of the generation of this. So this is going to be explained after this. Okay, I got this. Also some special characters. I also need to, in this case, particular case, the thing I'm doing here is validating that actually I generate the correct validation, the correct token for that URL. Also, I'm going to create some scope. I need to get the latest 10 of that. I need to describe also the tests for stats. Stats going to be three different things. Going to have uh, clicks per day, browsers we're using for this particular URL, and the platforms. Basically, just going to join every different browsers that we're having. For these tests, I'm creating three different clicks that are belonging to this URL, and these three different clicks are for Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and different platforms. So I'm submitting these things. So I got this spec, and now just going to get into something more specific. I need something to create actually the short URL. So what to do? I really understand that we got a unique ID every model we create. So if I want, for example, I have an idea of this thing, I wish to convert this to characters that actually has characters from A to C, minor K in downcase, and A to C in uppercase, and also have characters, digit characters, 0 to 9 characters. These are 62 possibilities that we have, 62 different characters that we can have. So it is pretty simple to do that conversion. We have here number in base 10. So what we'll need to do is to convert this in a number in base 62. Pretty much encoding from 0 to 9, and 11 sorry, 10 is going to be the letter A, and so on until we have a C uppercase. So I built a library here called encoder, and encoder is going to actually do that. So I pass here a number, and I expect that to convert in 62 number. That is going to be this one. And also I just pass a really big integer, and also expect that the conversion is successful. Now if I am doing the opposite, give it a number in 62 base, I want to have it equivalent on a base 10 number. And also if I just send a bunch of nonsense data, I expect nil for this particular encoder. So let's build encoder. Let's see how it's built. For this encoder, we're just going to do big chunk of data. That is going to be a constant. It's going to have what I said before: 0 to 9 digits, A to C, and A to C uppercase. You're gonna have a method that is called encode. I didn't have this as an instance method because I didn't found it necessary to instantiate an encoded object to perform this encoding. I think it's necessary just with the class method encode and decode. Why reverse? Because the algorithm is pretty much that I just get the number divided by 62 and continue going on for each one of the numbers I have in this base 10. And the reverse string for that is going to be our actual 62 base number. And for the deconversion, sorry, it's going to be the reverse of this. Why reverse? Because I am doing a multiplication for each one of the numbers I have. So 0 here, this A is going to be 10, this B is going to be 11. So I need to multiply that for 62 times the position that I have. So I need to get, for example, if I got a 0, if I got a I need to multiply 11 by 62 power 0. If the number is from 2 digits, it needs to be the first positions need to be multiplied by the power of 1, and later multiplied for the power of 0. For example, in this case, just to write a little bit, if we got a b, just going to convert this by saying A is 10 multiplying for 62 at the in this case in Rails power is this, so I got this plus uh, B is going to be 11 multiplying for 62 pow 0. We got a 3-digit number. It's going to be 210. 3 is going to be sorry, 4-digit number going to be 3210. So instead of, because I don't have, this index is not from the biggest to the lowest, so I just reverse it, reverse the change, the string, and go from 0 to the higher method. If I find an error, just throw it because it's going to be a non-parsable object number. Sorry. So this is our encoder, and here are specs for this. Sorry, the specs for this is going to be in here. So let's just run pretty quickly. This is specs. We're gonna have bundle sec specs spec controllers. Sorry, library, and library gonna have encoder spec. So we're just gonna have 4 successful, and let's go to the model. So we need to go to the model and see what happens. So I need to fulfill what I wrote here. I need, first of all, it has many clicks. I need to have has many clicks for the URL, and the URL has many clicks. I'm gonna build a scope that is going to be latest. It's gonna be just a limit by 10 and ordered by the send and order for creating that. I'm going to do after create because I'm going to set the short URL after the first save. Not necessarily I need to update that every time. I just update the model. So after create is going to fulfill our needs. And when I save for the first time, this is going to be what I want. For this one, I'm going to place one original URL validation for with an regex. I have a really useful here tool that is URI, default parser, make regex is going to create the regex before a valid URI, so that helps me. If this is not a valid URL, I'm just going to false. Also for short URL, do a really easy regex here for validating that that short URL includes characters from A to C downcase and A to C uppercase, also to include the digits. And we add a message for error that is going to be cannot contain special characters. Okay. For other things, so each time I do a click, I just want to store some information. I created here one great method here that's going to be perform click. Perform click is going to be browser name, platform, and just going to receive those two things. This is going to be from the controller. We're just going to store that in the click. Simple as that. And also update the counts click in one. For stats, I'm just going to return a hash that is going to have URL, clicks per day, browsers, and platforms. Each one of these is going to be a method. Going to be private because I don't want to publish that outside of this particular model. So I got clicks today count. It's going to be the clicks per day. Today, as you can see here, is nothing that is Rails built in. Is a scope I built. So I'm going to go to the scope after I review this model. Browsers is going to be map. Map for the browser has in clicks, and it's going to be with this particular method we're just going to find the non-duplicated values from this array, and we're going to join that, which is a simple comma. Same thing for platforms, and for create show URL, we're just going to do an encode. I want to encode the ID because the ID is unique, so I'm not having any issue if I am going to create a duplicate short URL. So I just encode the ID. I'm going to find the correct base 62 number for my short URL. I'm just going to use that. Also, can be used as a primary key, but I have to index that. After that, go to specs. Let's go and create some specs for clicks. Click spec, and we're gonna do a simple things validation just by that because we don't have necessarily a lot of things there. It's going to validate that browser and platform exists when I just submit it, and also I have a really bad URL ID that is going to be URL. And simple as that. Simple as that. The spec simple is the model. So click for model step has a relation belongs to URL. Remember we have here a one-to-many relationships. One URL has a lot of clicks, so URL has many clicks, and URL and click belongs to an URL. Here is the scope I mentioned before. We got today. It's going to be a where created from the beginning of the day and end of the day. I'm just going to validate browser platform URL ID to be present. And that's our model, so that's pretty good. So now let's build the API. As I mentioned before, we're going to use API. So particular, there are some things that need to be taken into account when building APIs in Rails. In this case, because we are not using exactly the Rails API bundler, I am just going to use the serializers from the active model. This gem is going to be really helpful because it's going to wrap out the entire models in the standard JSON API format. How to do that? I include this gem here, and we're going to have configuration dot in config. So config initializers, active model serializers is going to be initialized for that. Simple as that. We just require active model serializers, and we just create the default adapter for these serializers I'm using is JSON API. Simple as that. We have fulfilled the requirement of being JSON API compliant. And now, what is a serializer? Simple is a parser from a model to JSON, and I create two serializers: Quick Serializer and URL Serializer. Quick Serializer is pretty straightforward. Attributes is going to mention what we're going to show up in the JSON, so it's pretty straightforward. And URL has a little bit more complexity because we have to include the clicks that we have and tell serialize that we're going to serialize those clicks by click serialize. Later, we're going to have the URL. I am sending a relative path, and I'm just going to build the click for the URL with the full domain in the front end because I don't want to contaminate the serializers and models with information that doesn't belong to this layer. If it's a front end layer, I am just if I am accessing the domain and the host, I want to place that in the layer that response, the front end, not the back end, especially here. Now, just create that format. It's going to be just more readable than the standard number for this one, and that's it. Serializers, those are good. Now let's go to the controllers. We're going to have URLs controllers that is going to be inside the API. So what to complete and what to do in URLs controller. We're going to start with the specs. So with factories, we're going to do some helpers here. Build some helpers to help build our controllers. We just simple URL, a parse response from the body, JSON parse from the body, and data from that JSON body. These three helpers are going to be really useful in this bunch of specs. Now let's do default params for the URLs that requires that param. So first, before getting into this, we need to go to roads and check how these roads were built. We got get URL, URLs visit. This is going to be URL for. This is going to be the path for when I visit a model. URL. So when I visit a show URL, it's going to be be here. Node something. I'm just scoping the API for CRUD and some basic uh, GET requests. Create, show, and latest is going to be for URLs. And I'm gonna have this URL here. I think this is not necessary. And we're gonna have the stats URL here. I was gonna show our stats. So let me check really quick if when I change it, this is break all the code. Break it. I'm just going to put that again. And let's check out what I have on Red Silver. We're gonna have any. So I'm just going to remove this thing up. That is duplicated, so I don't know. I think that is pretty useful. Let's check again. Yeah, because we don't have any. I mean, later it's not in the resources, so it's not. Doesn't make sense to have that. So sorry for that mistake, but we just fix it. Get the latest and the URL stats. And we go back for URLs controller spec. Let's check out what we have here. We have simply that what happens when I have that data and what happens when I don't have data. What happens when I get latest with data. So I need to get the latest and simple. The data needs to be no longer than 10 and needs to be bigger than 0. If I got create, I expect I just store this helper for particular reasons. I just expect that when I just push the create, I post the create with the correct params, I expect that I'm just going to have the data created, and the response from that request is going to be a JSON API compliant response with the correct attributes for a specific data. Okay, for that we're clear. And what happens when I don't? It's not creating any URL because I just send wrong data. For example, original URL invalid. So I hope to raise an error. Remember, the Rails just get this and turn into 404. Show. It's going to show our URL. So with this one, I have successful status and also the attributes on the JSON API is compliant with the URL I just created here. And what else we have here? I'm going to do also a spec that is going to test that I am getting the stats from within the response. So within the data, I'm going to have relationships, I'm going to have clicks, and it's going to be the stats that I'm going to show. And when I just accessing a URL without a valid URL, or it's just not existing anything like this, it's going to show a 404. And without data, I expect that data is going to be empty, and no matter what, the status is going to be successful because it's not making sense that I throw an error here. For the stats, same example that I built for the model. Same example, just building basic URLs and clicks for this. I want a URL, 3 different clicks, and getting the stats for this one. So I just getting the clicks per day, browsers and platforms, and each one of those needs to be compliant with the expected response. And it's good. For this, I have completely finished that one, and I'm having just one thing remaining, the visit. I expect that when I visit one URL, I expect that clicks count is going to be increased, a click is going to be created, and also is going to redirect to the original URL. After all of that's done, this is the basic specs I am doing. And if that show URL is not existent, I'm just going to throw on 404. So this is good. What else? So let's build a functionality for that, for those specs. API controller and URLs controller. Simple as that. Latest, create, show stats, and save params because we are Rails creator 5, and each time we're just going to set up some parameters with a create. We need to save those params. So I'm just going to allow only the original URL. It's the only thing I'm just going to receive from the front end. And the latest, simple as that, is going to fetch the latest scope from the URLs and just render that. This can be done like this because of the active mode serializers gem. Save params also for the create. I'm gonna create just the original URL. Sorry. Show is going to have just going to find by the show URL. One thing to improve here will be just to decode the params URL into a valid ID and perform that you find. It's going to be faster than this. And render. Include clicks is going to include the relationship that it's going to have. And stats is going to be the same thing, but just going to show the stats. That is the JSON, custom JSON that I am placing in the URL model here. This is the JSON I am putting on. So that's good for the specs. And I'm going to build some more functionality for URLs controllers and the concerns to the visit. So I need just to find the URL and redirect to URL if the perform click is successful. The perform click is something that I did already. URL, the model that is going to pretty much create a click, update clicks count, and that's it. Because I implicit this sign is because I'm using this old sign here. Something wrong is going to throw an error instead of throw nil. After that, I'm ready to test my controllers. And one thing to note here is that I created one API controller. What is this for? Simple is to throw a status not found when I just not found a thing and not giving an error exactly. This is just to get myself into a more readable API. The skip before action this is because this API is open to everyone, so I don't need any security here. Otherwise, I will need to authenticate by a token in the client. So I need to perform that in the headers, but I don't have to do that, and I'm just not going to do that. So we are ready. Let's test our controllers. Simple as that. Controllers. Check out what happens if there's an error or something, not errors. So we are fine and ready to go. Now I'm gonna build the front end layer. For that, I'm just going to use a really cool gem that is called Webpacker. What happens with Webpacker? Webpacker is an implementation for Rails for Webpack. Webpack is a really big bundle for front end when I can just place in there assets, CSS, JS, and all of those things without affecting the assets pipeline here, or either getting into more complicated setup. Rails assets pipeline is not really useful for ECMAScript 6 or either the React. So it doesn't going to be really good approach if I use React in Rails using the Rails asset pipeline. I did this with the simple commands, the Rails web pack style. I will install the necessary. It's going to do an npm install, jar install, to install the basic React library and the properties from React, and it's going to do a setup project for that. It's going to install, if I do this, it's going to install React in that. for this one, my correction is that it's going to install Webpack exactly on our project. So with that given, it creates Webpack creates a default thing called JavaScript packs, and in this case, we're gonna just create a main JSX. This main JSX is going to have a simple thing: URL form, React. This is going to be our parent form. I am not using Redux here, using the basic React architecture and the flow that is unidirectional. So I'm going from parent to lower things. So the basic one is going to be URL form. It's going to be the parent, and just creating that and using the React DOM render just to render this main into the actual DOM. Let's build a URL form. URL form. This is just the HTML that we have on the view. It's going to be the form for that. Different things here is that I am just changing class names here for be React compliant. I'm going to set up the value to be the state of the original URL. I'm just going to render everything by the original URL. So the state is, if each time the state changes, is going to render all this thing. So I'm going to put a change event. It's going to be on change. There's going to be the handle change. So every time you just change, write something into the form, it's going to store that in the original URL state variable. This for what? Because when I click submit button, I'm not submitting this form because I don't want to submit the form to reload a page again. I want to everything loads smoothly and in the same page because it's an SPA. So I am just going to do a set state. And what is going to do this? When I say the state and change the original, I have here something that is going to handle the submit button and it's going to perform the actual request to the API I create. The URLs do a post here with the correct headers. I just set up the correct body for that, JSON body for that. Fetch items force update is just for each time I just update the submit and is successful, I am just reloading the list of URLs created. So fetch items is going to be the latest items. I'm going to store that in a variable as well. That is going to be data, the URLs, sorry. Set say URLs is going to store that. And you're going to store a variable that is called URLs loaded. And that's it. If we have some errors in here, just going to place an error. Inside this component, I have a really nice one called URL list. That is the second one we have found here. All this thing is URL list. All this thing is the URL for. So for this particular case, this thing, I am rendering the URL list. So let's build the URL list component. URL list component is just going to have properties. The items is going to be each URL I'm just rendering. The loaded, error stats, things like that. Show stats. Let's go to the quit of this company, the actual table. I'm going to render each one of the table rows with the items, with each one of the attributes of the items, and just going to have the show URL for each one of the references from here. And that's it. We set up. But there's a difference here. And the difference is I'm using React hooks. React hooks allows me to perform all the React operations without actually inheriting from React component class. That helps me to render different things. If there was an error, somehow an error loading the stats or pretty much in the state, I'm just not going to load anything. Load an error. Otherwise, while it's loading, because I'm sending here the property item loaded, just going to wait and put a loading div in there. And in this part, I have really good component here. Going to be stats. Below each URL is going to reside stats component. Stats component is really straightforward. Just a bunch of data. We're gonna show clicks per day, browsers and platforms. I'm not using a new URL for this. I'm just putting that inside table. And that's it. We have stats, URL form, and URLs. Because we are following this particular hierarchy, each time I have data in a state, pretty much I am just going to date the entire data without needed to reload data. So here is our, just go to example Google. Let's go this. Page, whatever. I just found this on internet and short URL. And here we go. We have all the things here because I am just rendering the latest 10. I think it's just having the latest ones. So let's reload. And we have here our URL. No clicks yet. Let's do a click. Let's reload here. We got 2 clicks on this one. And I'm gonna see the stats. And this is gonna be the stats for this one. Pretty much I'm just getting Chrome into that. And for this one, these are the stats and so on. So this is the project. This is the thing I done for this code challenge. Hope you like it. Some other questions, you can reach me directly in GitHub. And that's it. Any different things I have done here? I'm just using the basic React setup. Didn't do anything pretty forward from that. I did pretty basic React setup and pretty basic specs for this one. So that's it. Thank you very much and have a good day.